Good morning, beautiful quilters. It is January. This is the first quilt that I have done in 2026, and I'm very excited to share it with you. I received for Christmas a beautiful cave facet jelly roll in purples and blues and teals, and I was looking for a jelly roll pattern to use, and I found a free one, which is that not everyone's favorite type of pattern? I buy patterns. I have a pattern right now that I just bought called Heartsy by Cluck Cluck Sew. That's gonna be my February quilt, but I found a free pattern for my January quilt, and I'm so excited to share it with you guys. And I used a jelly roll, but if you had scraps, because each of these blocks is made with 2.5 inch squares, you could very easily make this from your stash, and each block is different. I had all these fun, vibrant prints, and I wanted to showcase them. And so I really wanted to highlight all the different colors and patterns. And I like the cave facet prints. They're not for everyone, but I love their boldness. My husband had also given me a fat quarter bundle of solid fabrics. And so I used those solids to try to kind of help pop the prints. But sometimes I know there's at least one on here. This one right here, let me open this up a little bit here. This one here is all prints. And so this pattern is so fun because you take 2.5 inch squares, you lay them out however you want your pattern to go, and then you sew them. So this first row is 1, 2, 3, your background, your print, a background, and then you add a background here. So I'm gonna show you, but when you finish it, you have all these jagged edges hanging off. Then you turn it and you cut those triangles off to get your square. So then everything is set in the diamond. It looks hard, it's so easy. Now the free pattern just had all white background, and I played around with that, but ultimately I ended up going back to a quilt store and picking up this cave print that was pink and has green and purple and blue, and I added cornerstones, which the pattern I'm gonna link in the description did not show cornerstones. It just had 2.5 inch wide strips of background, and so the only color on the quilt was these granny squares. I ultimately decided, after playing around with it, that I liked the look of cornerstones, and so I added this print that had a lot of the colors. And then for my border, I also, when I picked up the cornerstone fabric, I picked up a bold cave facet print that had some of the royal blue, purple, pink, even a little bit of the green. It has some black in there. And so I thought that this really helped pull all the colors out of the quilt. And so this inner border here is 2.5 inch strips. And this other border here, I did 4.5 inch strips. And then I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with the corners. I love looking at patterns online, and I modified this pattern quite a bit because I made the blocks exactly how they make the blocks. The blocks are the exact same. And my sashing is 2.5 inch strips, but I added the cornerstones, and then I added a secondary border of 4.5 inch wide print. This border is not in the pattern I'm gonna link. I just wanted to add a border. And then the other thing I did, again, just to customize it a little bit for what I wanted, was here on the corners. What I did was on this first border, I added a cornerstone here that matches the cornerstones in the middle of the quilt, and then I made a 4.5 inch square cornerstone for my 4.5 inch wide border. And so this detail, and this extra border is not in the pattern. I just felt like it added something. The other thing I did was, because I had so much fabric, the original quilt pattern, I think, just called for 6 rows with 5 blocks in each row. I had enough fabric to make mine 7 rows with 5 blocks, and I still have fabric left over, but this was already getting quite large, and I wanted to make sure, even with borders, that it was gonna fit on my backing fabric. And what I used for my backing is a beautiful purple minky. So this purple is, my local quilt store had sent out an email. They started carrying the Cuddle Minky in the 90 inch wide. So this is a purple Cuddle Minky, 90 inches wide. So I got 2 yards of that because my, I believe my finished size ended up being about 70 by 90. I'll double check that, but it was about a twin size quilt is what I ended up making. And so I had, this is already 90 inches. So I didn't have to do a piece backing. And to quilt it, I have a wavy a wavy stitch on my sewing machine. And so I just set it to that. And I did about every 1 inch, just some wavy line quilting. And I used a lavender glide thread. And so I was so happy with how this turned out. I just think it was so fun. Has a little bit of fuzz on it, but let me show you how to put one of these blocks together. Okay, so I'm gonna show you what I started with. So for this quilt, I started with some background fabric. This is just, I think, Kona, it's like a Kona white background, very just plain. And I cut that into 2.5 inch strips, and then I subcut it into 2.5 inch squares. So I have a bunch of these 2.5 inch squares cut out. I also have several cut out in solid colors. And then, so these are kind of the ones I pulled out of my Jellyroll that I decided not to end up using. Just some of these were a little bit darker than I wanted to use. And so these are the strips I didn't end up using. So if you have a Jellyroll, you're gonna have some left over. I had this fat quarter bundle of solid colors that I'd also received for Christmas. And so I did cut a lot of that up into 2.5 inch squares. And so I ended up with a whole smorgasbord of prints and colors and solid white, all in 2.5 inch squares, which is quite fun, really. So you have all these different ones to work with. So then all you have to do is decide on your layout. And so for several of my blocks, I started with a single solid color in the middle. And then I would take some prints and lay those prints around my solid color. So basically, we're gonna work on making one that looks very similar to this block right here. So we're gonna make one that looks like this. So I'm gonna add in some prints here. And there's no right or wrong. And if you're working from your scraps, this could be completely scrappy and that would be totally fine. And it would still look, I think, really beautiful. So now I'm gonna next lay in another color. And so I'm adding in my next prints here. And we're gonna build it out in this way. And I need one more print for out here on the edges. And again, there's no right or wrong to this. You can play around with your prints, your layouts as much as you want until you achieve something that you're happy with. And there's no right or wrong. You just keep playing with it till you're happy with your layout and colors. That is all of the prints that I'm going to use for this one. I'm next going to add in my white squares. And again, I'm going to put a link in the description of this video to the free pattern online. And it goes over, you know, how many squares total do you need for the quilt, how much background yardage you need. And so all of that's going to be linked in the free pattern. I'm just adding in my white squares all the way around. This is just my background. I think this could look fun also with a scrappy background, or if you used light colored prints, like very, you know, prints that are maybe on a white background, and then you used a solid color for your background, like a dark teal or something, or dark purple. I mean, I think you could really play around with this. My mom said she was always a fan of granny square quilts that had a black background. So that's, you know, you can really have fun with this. So now that I have my layout how I want it, I'm gonna start sewing my rows together. So this first one I'm not gonna do anything with right now. I'm gonna start with this row here. And the way I'm gonna sew it is I'm going to flip this one over here, and I'm gonna sew a 1/4 inch seam right down this side. So this is the way I did all of these blocks. I started from one edge and I sewed each row. So I'm gonna do here, 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 and here. This top square and this bottom square we're not gonna use yet. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just make sure that I have a 1/4 inch foot. For me, it's number 97 with the Bernina. So I am just going to attach my 1/4 inch foot, and I'm just gonna switch it here to foot number 97. That's what I'm using for piecing. I have some little clippers or scissors something to be a leader or an ender. My stitch length is on 2.5 and I'm on a straight stitch. Okay, so I'm gonna take this first one we just flipped over. I'm gonna make sure it's lined up well. Now, because I cut these 2.5 inch squares out of a jelly roll, it has a pinked edge. Now, I'm not gonna worry about that. I'm just gonna try to center it so that there's a little bit of pinking hanging over either side. I'm just gonna center it on there as best I can. I'm gonna start with this just to make sure I don't end up with knots on the back of my fabric. I'm gonna pick up my next row and do the same thing. And I'm just gonna keep going in this pattern again. Now here, I'm gonna again just try to center that as best I can. And there's gonna be a little bit of the pinked edge hanging off, and that's okay. One more. Okay, so I wanna just line this up. If you're cutting your squares out of yardage, you're not gonna have to worry about that pinked edge. But if you're using a jelly roll, a lot of the jelly rolls are pinked. Okay, I'm gonna snip this off and I'm gonna put these right where I started from. So I am just going to finger press this to one side and put it down right where I picked it up earlier. Snip, finger press, and then replace. And this is what I did. Now, this is not the fastest quilt I've done, but I just listened to podcasts and audiobooks, and this quilt took me about a month because the blocks come together and have their unique designs because of the color placement that you're using. You do have to be really careful with making sure that you're putting things back where you picked them up from. So if you rush this, you may end up with things not where you want them. Okay, I'm just going to press this to the side as well, put it back where it was. Okay, so this first row is almost done. So now I'm just going to add this one. And again, what I'm going to do here is just make sure that I can see just a little bit of that pinked edge, because that should be centered on that block as well as I can get it. And I'm just going to stitch down the side with a 1/4 inch seam. Same thing with this next one. Now what I found out was you could turn it this way, but actually found it easier to square it up if I turned it so the pinked edges were next to the pinked edges, and I just lined it up here along this straight edge and then sewed. This next one here. Oh, I have 2 blocks in there. Okay, just make sure you're going right sides together. Line it up as best you can. And you're just gonna keep repeating this process. Okay, so once you have all of your strips sewn and you have it laid back out, you know, in your original pattern, the next thing we need to do is iron these. Okay, so I'm gonna flip them over, and what I'm gonna do is iron it so that all the seams are going one direction. Okay, I'm gonna do that with each of these. I'm gonna start from one end and I'm gonna iron it down so that all the seams are going in one direction. I'll give it a little steam and just iron it so that all the seams are going in the same direction, which for me, I'm pressing them all to the left right now. So now I'm gonna lay this back out. So these seams are going to the left. On this next row, I want the seams to go to the right, so I'll just rotate it so the seams are going to the right. And then the middle row, I'll have the seams going to the left. So here you can see the seam is going left. So I have left, right, left. So this one needs to go back to the right, and then this one needs to go to the left. Okay, so now I'm ready to stitch these. Okay, this part is not hard. All I'm gonna do is lay this on top here. So I'm gonna basically center it, so there should be about a 1/4 inch hanging over on either side. And then I'm gonna drop my foot pedal down, stitch. I do a little back stitch here, and a stitch and a back stitch. When you open this, it should look like this. You're not even gonna see your print, but when you fold this open, now it's there, okay? And there should be a 1/4 inch more here and a 1/4 inch more there. I am just gonna iron this towards the background. Okay, ready to add the next row. Now I want these seams to nest, okay? So I've got these seams here are going to the left and these seams here are going to the right. So I'm gonna lay this on here and my seams should nest up really nicely. Now, all over on me, so I am going to put a clip here. I'm gonna make sure these seams are nested up really nicely, and I'm going to put a clip here. Now, we're gonna start from the side that's shorter, okay? So again, it should be extending about a 1/4 inch past that first seam. It's not gonna go all the way up to the edge. I'm gonna line it up under here and put my presser foot down, stitch, back stitch, and I'm gonna stitch all the way down. When I come to this intersection, I really wanna make sure those are butted up together nicely so I get a good intersection, a good crisp seam. If you have to adjust, you can. I feel like I slipped a little bit to one side, so I'm gonna pull this back even, so this is all even here. Little back stitch, and I'll cut those threads, okay? Same thing, when you open this up, it should now look about like that. I'm gonna just lightly finger press this, and then I'm gonna iron it. Okay, so now we have this. Now we're gonna do our middle row. So again, these seams were going to the right, so this next one should be going to the left, and I'm gonna lay that on. This is the very center of the block. So I'm gonna start by matching up my seams in the center, and then I will match my seams on the edge. So I'm gonna start here and just slide that over till they touch nicely and clip. Same thing here. Make sure that I am really nicely matched up and a clip. Then I'm gonna come out to the sides and do the same thing here. Just making sure that it is nicely matched and then put a clip. Same thing on this one, matching and clipping. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over so that my shorter side is on top. Make sure that I'm extended about a 1/4 inch out right there, and then I will go ahead and start sewing. Stitch, back stitch, all the way down the side with a 1/4 inch seam. If I need to adjust it a little bit, if it's slipping on me, just take the time to adjust as needed. A little back stitch on the end. Okay. All right, we're over halfway done with this block. This is, see my seams here? It's a little bit off on the corner, but I'd rather have it off here than in the middle, because the middle is the very center of your block. So if I had to choose which seam to match up, I'd rather it match up in the center. And if it's a little bit off out here on the corner, I'm not gonna worry about that. Okay. So far, so good. And again, I'm using a lot of crazy prints here, but the solid, really, I think doing a solid color in the center really helps kind of pull it all together. Okay, I need to do it this way, right? Yeah, so these seams are going left. These seam allowances on the back are going to the right. I will lay it together. And again, I'm gonna start here at the center, making sure these are really nice and tight. Okay, then I will come out to my edges. One more here. Is it necessary to pin or clip? That's really a personal preference. This is what I did for all the blocks. And I ended up having 7 rows of 5. So I had 35 blocks. This is number 36, just so I can demo. Okay, we are almost at the end. Let's just press this one a little. Yeah, that's looking really nice. Okay, I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out. And I just have 2 more rows to go. And then I'll show you how we square these blocks up. Okay, not much to match here. I don't know that I'm gonna pin because there's not much matching to do. I think I can just hold it because it's not very long. I'm just gonna again make sure I'm really matched up there and there. I'll press this. And so you can just have a lot of fun laying out your block. And if you have a bunch of 2.5 inch squares in your stash, just go to town, have fun. You can make it super scrappy. Okay, we're about ready to cut. We're about to square this up. Okay, so right now, you should have something that looks about like this. I'm gonna show you how we're gonna trim it so that it can go into the quilt. So what I need to do right now is we built our block this way, right? We built it this way, but it's actually gonna sit in the quilt this way. And clearly this is not very sewable right now. So what I need to do is square this up. Okay, so what I need to do right now is square this up. So what I'm gonna do is I want to line this point and this point up on the line. So pick a line on your cutting board, and I like to put a point and a point there. This is just how I was doing these. Then I take my ruler and I try to go 1/4 inch over from these inner points. So see these inner points? You want to make sure your first cut is 1/4 inch beyond that. So I'm going to line this up here. And you can also make sure you should be at a 1/4 inch beyond here, okay? So just kind of make sure that you're all lined up, and then you're gonna make that first cut. So you just trim these little triangles off. This does end up being waste, but I don't think it's a lot of waste, and for how pretty this quilt turned out, I'm okay with it. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn this again, and just pick a line on your ruler. Actually, this is a rotating cutting mat. I just I forgot. Okay, so lining it up. Okay, and then I'm gonna come over here and I wanna go 1/4 inch. So I'm 1/4 inch beyond, and I'm gonna trim this up, okay? So now your blocks should square to 9 inches. So I'm just gonna make sure that I am right now. Let me just come down here like so. So I'm lining this up here. So here's my 9 inch line. And I'm gonna line it up here on my 9 inch line. I'm gonna go ahead and trim it on this side. I'll rotate. And from here, so 13 minus 9 is 4. So let me go to the 4 inch line here. Okay, 4 inches lines. This should be 9 inches. So I'm making a 9 inch square. Okay. So now it's gonna sit in your quilt like this. So we built it, you know, in rows going this way with squares. And then we had those triangles hanging off the end. Then once you square your block up to 9 inches, it should look like this. What I did, because I was working on this over the course of a month, is I took at this point a piece of sashing, because I knew I was gonna set this with sashing, and I went ahead and on at least one side added a 9 inch by 2.5 inch strip of sashing. And the reason I did that was because now this is a bias edge. Because we've cut it on the diagonal, this is a bias edge. And I knew this project was gonna take me a while because I was working on it 1 or 2 blocks a day over the entire course of January. And I didn't want this block to completely distort and stretch while I was moving it and working on it this month. So I would go ahead and add 1 piece of sashing to one side of each block as I made them, just to kind of help anchor the block in a way so that there wasn't too much stretching or distortion going on until I had a chance to put the whole quilt together. So this square that we made today is one like this with a center color. But I also made several like this where I did a center print and then did solid colors. And so it was like 3 rows of prints, and then you can just have a lot of fun with it, okay? This one has even a different print than the prints that are on the outside. I've got 3 different prints going on here with a center. So this is just totally up to your imagination and what you have, what fabrics you're working with. But I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. I'm going to put a link to the free pattern, and happy quilting.